Welcome back on the Saturday morning. Jury deliberations are set to resume in the next hour in the Delphi double murder trial against Richard Allen in Indiana. Allen faces 4 counts related to deaths of 2 young teenagers, Abigail Williams and Libby German. The jury deliberating for 9 hours since closing arguments ended on Thursday. Here with us now, legal analyst and trial attorney Misty Marris. Misty, always good to see you. This case, as we were listening to the testimony, it gets harder and harder to process the details. Are you surprised there's no verdict yet?
You know, I'm not, Hannah, and there's a reason for that. This case, at the very beginning, especially when we knew what was going to come into the courtroom, right? We knew that there was going to be confessions, over 60 confessions made by Richard Allen while he's behind bars. It seemed like the prosecutors really had a very tight case, and it was the defense who was going to have a really uphill battle. However, this is one of those cases that really emphasizes you don't know what's going to happen until the trial actually unfolds, because what the defense was able to do was cast doubt on a lot of the critical points of the prosecution's case. So the jury actually has a significant amount to grapple with and to make that determination basically about what they believe, to make those decisions about the questions of fact, which from the defense perspective, they raised a lot in their case to undercut the prosecution's theory. So I'm not surprised to see the jury taking more time than we would have maybe expected from the outset to make a decision on this case.
And you would have thought it was going to be a slam dunk. The jury heard multiple recordings where Allen confessed to the crime. So how successfully did the defense counter that very testimony?
That testimony was countered pretty successfully because the defense says that he was actually psychotic at the time that he was making those confessions. Right. And there's a couple of other things that really made it difficult for the prosecutors to establish that these confessions were made in sound mind, or at least put a question mark in the jury's head. One of that is his prison psychologist was actually a very big true crime fan. She used her position to access information about the case that she would not normally have access to. So she's the one in these one-on-one meetings who's counseling him. Now, the defense said, well, she might have planted some information in his mind because of her interest in the case, not doing her job. She should have never been his psychiatrist given that situation. And she did not withdraw. She also on the stand talked about how he was subjected to some of the harshest conditions of any prisoner. And she found it odd because it appeared that he was being punished. The jury also saw incredibly disturbing videos of Allen in solitary confinement, in very compromising situations, spreading his own feces, just really, really disturbing images, which would tend to favor that argument that he was psychotic at the time or not of sound mind. So is it dispositive? No, there were other experts who said that he was, the way that he was speaking, it was linear. A person in psychosis couldn't have spoken this way. However, that is enough for the jury to sit there and grapple with it and question whether or not these confessions were actually made by a person in sound mind who is the killer, or whether it was he had just convinced himself by April of 2023, because of all of these harsh conditions, that he actually had done something wrong when he didn't. So a lot for the jury to analyze.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the forensic evidence in the prosecution's case. Did it hold up in court?
So the prosecution had a bullet between the bodies. That was a large part of their case. But a defense expert also was able to debunk some of that. They said that the match was based on what Allen fired a gun later. So during the investigation, Allen fired a gun and they tried to match the bullet, which was not fired. The bullet that was found between the bodies was not fired with that fired bullet. Expert for the defense said that's like comparing apples and oranges. That has nothing to do with a match, and that it's likely that this bullet that was found between the bodies actually came from somewhere else, not Richard Allen's gun. Also, the bridge guy video. This is the big piece of evidence, a critical part of the prosecution's theory of the case. A witness who had seen bridge guy described him as 6 feet tall, fit, and young. There was a question about what the color of his jacket was, but 6 feet tall, fit, and young. Allen is only 5'5", and an investigator on the stand admitted that the police never did an analysis of his height because it was too costly. They never analyzed how tall bridge guy is from that video. So there's another aspect that is undercut. The prosecution's case very much undercut. And also, last but not least, the defense really poked holes in the prosecutor's timeline. They say that Allen came upon Abby and Libby, was intending to commit a sexual crime, got freaked out because he saw a van on an obscure road drive by and ultimately killed them. They were dead by 3 p.m. Well, their phones were active. The headphone jack was active at 5 o'clock at night and 10:32 at night. Prosecutor or the witnesses on the stand didn't even know that on cross-examination. Yes. So the defense alternative theory is that they were taken out of the woods and planted there later. So those are some of the big arguments the defense was able to raise, specifically because the investigation had some serious issues and some serious holes, and defense was able to exploit that. What the jury will make of that, only time will tell. And I think that's why we're seeing this go on for protracted deliberations in the room.
It's just so disturbing every time we get new details. Misty Marris, thank you for breaking that down for us.
Thanks, Anna.